Hello everyone, welcome to Salesforce Predator. In this channel we discuss about various concepts and technologies. In this video series we are discussing about JavaScript. In today's video we'll see what is JSON.Stringify and JSON.Parse. Now when we are working with JavaScript, so in scenarios where we need to pass data to server, let's say JavaScript object, we need to pass it to server. So what we do usually, we convert it into a string, okay, and then pass it on to the server. And for that operation we need to use JSON.Stringify. Okay, and again let's say from server we are getting a result in form of string and we need to utilize it in JavaScript HTML file, let's say. So for that we will convert our string which is received from server into JavaScript object and then further use it. Okay, so for that purpose we'll use JSON.Parse. So let's look into JSON.Stringify first. To convert JavaScript object to string, it is used. We can even convert the array into strings using JSON.Stringify. Okay, and while converting object into string, what happens is if there is any function present over there in the object, right? So what it does, it removes that particular function. So the end result, the end string which you have, it won't be having the functions in it. Okay, now if you want to avoid this, if you want to have function when you convert object into string, so for that what you have to do, you have to first convert your functions into string before using it inside JSON.Stringify function. Okay, so that way what will happen, your functions will be converted into string, and when you run JSON.Stringify on the object, so that object entirely will be converted into string and it will be containing the function in it. Okay, further if your objects are having date objects as properties, okay, so those are again converted into string. So later on if you want to convert that stringified object again into JavaScript object, so for that you need to do some changes. Okay, what are use cases of JSON.Stringify? So as we see, it can be used when we are sending data to server. Okay, so it has to be in a string format. Again, let's say if we want to store locally some data in our browser, okay, in the local storage of our browser. So for that, what we had to do, we had to convert our data into string and then store it. Okay, so we are going to look into this using some example. Don't worry. Okay. Next is JSON.Parse. So exactly reverse of it. It converts the string into JavaScript object. Okay. And let's say you have converted array, a JavaScript array into a string using JSON.Stringify. So on the end result, if you apply JSON.Parse, so it will give you array. Okay, it won't return you object or something else. Okay, it will return the array from which it was derived. Okay. Now when receiving data from web server, data is always in string. Okay, so for that what we had to do, we had to just use JSON.Parse and it will become JavaScript object so that we can utilize it in our further operations. And we should avoid using functions in JSON. We already saw this. Since even if we convert function into string before using it in JSON.Stringify, uh, the end result will be having functions in it as a part of string, but they will lose their scope. Okay, so to convert them back into functions, we have to use this eval operator. Okay, and using this eval operator, we need to make or convert that function into a proper function syntax. So we'll look into this with the help of example. Don't have to worry. And yeah, date objects are also not allowed in JSON. So if you want to include date, we need to write it as a string, correct? And then when we pass it, so uh, it will be in a string format. So to avoid that, we need to again convert it into a date format. Okay, so we'll look into this also. So let's dive into our VS Code and let's look into some examples to get better understanding of these two operations. Okay, so these are very important operations. So most of the time when you're working in any projects, you have to use these JSON.Parse and JSON.Stringifies every now and then. Okay, let's take an example. So let's say we have a car object associated and we are using it in our project. Okay, let's say we have some properties. We have name, let's say Maruti, then we have model Suzuki, we have a price property. Let's say 12 lakh is the price. Okay, so this is our object. Now let's say if I want to make server call, so what I'll do, I had to convert this into string. Okay, and for that what we use JSON.stringify. Okay, so let's store it in some variable. So car string equals to, what we have to do, we have to use JSON.stringify, and here we need to pass car as a parameter to it. Okay, let's add a console here. Car string is car. Okay, so this is after stringify. What we'll do is we'll just add before stringify also to get the difference between them. Okay, so we'll just save this, we will execute this code. Oh, okay, so what I have to do, I have to use comma over here, and here I need to specify car string instead of car. Now execute this. See, the first one, you can see it is in object form, and the second one is a string. Okay, so we after we have applied this JSON.stringify, we are getting this car string which we have printed over here. So you can see this is actually the string of derived from this object. Okay, now let's say we have got a string from this object, we have already performed some operations, and now again we want to convert this string back to JavaScript object. Okay, so for that what we have to use? We have to use JSON.parse. So we will create a variable, let's say car object equals to, and here we need to use JSON.parse, and the parameter will be car string. Okay, let's add a console to see the result. Car object after parse, and we need to select car object here. Let's save this. Let's comment some of our consoles to avoid the confusion. So we only will have this console. Okay, now we will execute our code. You can see car object after parse, and here you can see name, model, and price. Okay, now we need to look into certain scenarios. Okay, so let's say we have date as a property in our object. Okay, so what will happen when we do JSON.stringify and then again we do JSON.parse in case our object is having date property? Okay, so let's create date property. Let's add one property, let's say purchase date for this car equals to we'll have new date, right? So this will give us the current date. Now let's say I comment this part for now and just look into how our object will look. So just execute this. You can see purchase date is here. So if I hide this, you can see the purchase date. So today's date and time is mentioned over here, okay, as this property's value. Now let's say I want to stringify this. Okay, so I will stringify this, and once I stringify, so let's see what exactly is it showing. So just uncomment this comment and we will execute. You can see the purchase date property is there, but this value it is in string form. Okay, now let's say this car string is there. Now if I am again parsing it to convert it into JavaScript object again, so what will happen? Will it give me a date or not? Okay, let's try this. Let's convert this. Let's uncomment or add a comment for one of the console log. Let's execute this. Okay, so you can see car object after parse, and here it is not showing me the date, it is showing me string. Okay, earlier how it was showing in IST format. So before we applied this JSON.stringify, it was showing in IST format. It was having like day, that is Thursday, then September, all things mentioned over there in GMT format. Now, since we are not getting it in a actual date format, what we can do is we can specifically convert that property into date format. So here what we'll do, we'll take that property car object dot purchase date equals to, and we will convert it into a date format. Here again we need to specify same thing, car object dot purchase date. We will save this. Let's comment this console and let's try to execute this. You can see we are getting the result. Let's look into it. So we cannot see the entire console here. Let's copy this and let's paste it here for a moment so that we'll get it. See, we can see this purchase date property is mentioned over here in a exactly date format, which it was there earlier before converting it or stringifying that particular object, right? So this is how you can work with date properties when you are using stringify and parse, right? Now, apart from date, we have also one thing. If we are using functions in our object, and then if we are trying to stringify it, so those functions are totally removed from the result. Okay, so even key and value both are not present over there in the results. So to avoid that, what we can do is we can convert it into string before conversion or before passing it in JSON.stringify. Okay, so let's look into an example. Let's have a function over here. Let's say get model, and this function will return the model of our current car. So let's say return this dot model. Okay, and now I'll just comment this console and uncomment this one. Okay, let's see what we are getting. So if I try to execute, you can see we are getting this object, and let's say we remove this purchase date for a moment. Okay, because this purchase date is not required for this example. We need to see the function, and here in console log we cannot see the function actually. Every time we have to then copy this console log and paste it over here so that you can see it. So to avoid that, we are just removing purchase dates since we already seen this scenario. Now let's see if I try to execute this. You can see we are getting this get model function over here, right? Now if I stringify it, let's see what happens. Let's stringify it. Let's execute this. You can see the function is not present over here in the result. Why? Because this function is totally removed. Both key and property is removed when we do stringify on a particular object. So to avoid this, what we can do is we can convert this function into string before passing it into JSON.stringify. So let's do it now. What we have to do, so it's a very simple task. We have to access this car dot get model, and then car dot get model dot to string. Okay, that's it. So this will convert our function into string. Now if I try to execute this, you can see we are getting function over here after stringify also, but uh, it is there in the string format. Okay, now let's say if I try to parse it, okay, parse this string again to make it into an object, right? So what will happen? Will I be getting this function properly? So let's try this. Let's remove this console log. So what we are doing here, we are parsing this string. Okay, just uncomment, just add a comment for this console, just execute this. One more time we'll try. Yeah, so we are getting result. Let's expand this. Yeah, so here you can see we are getting function, but it is not exactly the way we wanted. Okay, so we are getting it in a string format only, and this function has lost its scope. Okay, So now what we have to do is we have to use eval function over here, so to get our object into its proper format. Okay, so we'll use car object dot eval car object dot get model equals to eval. And what this eval function do is, so whatever is present inside this parenthesis, so it will evaluate it, okay, and then assign the result to this left hand side. Okay, so here what we need to do is we need to create a format, and here we need to specify car object dot get model, the function name, and close this parenthesis. Okay, now just save this, execute this, and let's see what we are getting it. Let's execute it again. There's some issue. Let's remove this console log for now. Let's see. Yeah, now we are getting this console log. Let's expand this. Correct. So this way we are getting this in a proper function format. Okay, so now we have seen how we can use date, how we can use functions when we are using JSON.stringify and JSON.parse. Now let's look into a use case where we actually use JSON.stringify and JSON.parse. Okay, so let's go to our browser and I will set it up for you. Okay, so let's take a variable, let's say car data equals to any value, let's say Maruti. Okay, and let's execute this. So now if I try to access car data, I am getting the value Maruti. Okay, now what happens, let's see if I refresh this browser. Okay, I refresh this browser. Now if I try to access car data, I'm getting this car data is not defined error. Okay, but now what if I want to store data into browser so that after refresh of this window I'm still able to access that data. Okay, so can I do that? Yes, we can utilize the browser's local storage to store certain data, and then after refresh or even after refresh we can access that data from the local storage. Okay, we have some functions present there, but the requirement is we have to convert our data into string before storing it there locally in the browser's local storage. Okay, so let's take an example. Let's have a data, let's say constant, and here we'll have just name of the car as a property. Okay, let's say Maruti. We'll execute this and we will convert it into string. So car string equals to, what we have to do, we have to use JSON.stringify because we are converting object into string, right? Here we need to specify car and we need to execute. Okay, now the function used to store locally is local storage dot set item, sorry, local storage dot set item. Here we need to specify the name of the property. Okay, and here we need to specify the actual data which we are going to store, and click on execute. Okay, now we have stored the data. Now let's say if I try to refresh this, before that we need to take this variable somewhere. Okay, because we need to use this car string data. Let's copy it over here for a moment and let's refresh this. Now what if I want to access that data? So for that also we have a function, let's say let car data fetch equals to local storage dot get item. Okay, we need to use local storage dot get item, and here we need to pass our parameter. So this thing, the car string data which we specified over there, we need to pass it there and click on execute. Now if I try to access this car data fetch property, you can see we are getting the data even after we have refreshed this browser, right? But the thing is, this is in string format. If I want it back into the JavaScript object format, what we have to do? Yes, so we have to convert it into JavaScript object using JSON.parse. Okay, so let's have car fetch object equals to JSON.parse, and there we need to specify this car data fetch property and execute. So let's try to access this car data car fetch object. You can see we have this car data in an object form. Okay, so that was the use case where we utilize json.string and json.parse. Okay, now if you have any questions associated to these two, you can write it down in the comment section, and thank you for watching this video. Do not forget to subscribe this channel.